I don't know what to tell you, Alex. The trend kind of started a few years back in '07 when Arkansas State beat Michigan. That was not a bad Michigan team. Last year, Iowa almost lost to UNI. Iowa was a very good team last year. We went to the Orange Bowl, as everyone knows. I don't know why it's happening. I think a lot of times teams are overlooking the FCS teams. It is their Super Bowl. It's their one chance in the year to actually prove themselves worthy of playing against FBS teams. And for whatever reason, some of these teams overlook the FCS teams, which Minnesota you take, for example. I have no idea why Tim Brewster would ever look past an FCS team again. They almost lost to South Dakota in the past. They did lose to North Dakota State in the past. They lose to South Dakota this year. Tim Brewster has to be in some hot water. Other than that, Virginia Tech's a very good team. It was a hangover, as you said, against James Madison. I think Virginia Tech can rebound. And when you talk about how this impacts Boise State, I think you can look at it two ways. One, obviously it discredits their win against Virginia Tech. Now, I'm not going to totally discredit it because Virginia Tech can still bounce back and have a good year. But if that's the win that they're hanging their hat on, it has lost a little luster. But if you look at it another way, this shows that any team can lose to any team any given week if they don't prepare. So one of the knocks on Boise State is they play in a terrible conference, the WAC. Anyone could run through it. This kind of shows that some of the better FBS teams could still lose to anyone on any given Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, briefly, we talked about Michigan. And I just want to make the point, too, Michigan started that season 0-2. They got killed by Oregon the week after they lost to Appalachian State. And then they still ended up the year with 9 wins. They beat Florida in a bowl game. So Virginia Tech could still possibly have a good year, but they got a lot of problems to work out before then. Let's pick a couple games that are coming up this weekend. First, Notre Dame, off a really close loss to Michigan, has to travel to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. Jake, who do you got in this one?
There's a lot of things you can say that Notre Dame did well last week. Dane Christ had a decent game when he was healthy and in there, and this year he's proven to be a pretty good quarterback. Armando Allen has had some good games rushing. He has 182 yards this year, averaging over 5.5 yards a carry. But they also allowed over 500 yards to one player last year from Michigan, to Denard Robinson. That's just embarrassing for a defense. Michigan State, on the other hand, last year they lost 5 games by just 1 score. They returned 14 starters. They haven't looked great in their first 2 games, but I think they've shown more to me than Notre Dame has with their win over a pretty bad Purdue team and that loss to Michigan. I think Michigan State's going to win at home.
Mike. I think this is a battle between the 2 defensive coordinators, Pat Narduzzi at Michigan State and Bob Diaco at Notre Dame. The issue here, Florida Atlantic, if you break down the numbers, if you look at it, they had 20 first downs against Michigan State. Jeff Van Camp, the quarterback at Florida Atlantic, was 23 for 35 for 215 yards, and Florida Atlantic had 11 penalties and got inside Michigan State's 30-yard line a couple times and weren't able to get points on the board. What you got to realize is this Notre Dame team on offense with players like Kyle Rudolph, who had a 95-yard touchdown against Michigan, and Michael Floyd receiving the ball, are going to provide matchup problems for a weak and less efficient secondary at Michigan State. And then, of course, Armando Allen putting up 93 yards in the first week, 89 in the second. He's a talented back. I think the issue here, a lot of people, like you said, they're going to frown on Notre Dame. Denard Robinson is an anomaly in college football. Michigan State, the way their offense is structured, they're not going to put up 500 yards, most likely not going to put up 500 yards against Notre Dame. Denard Robinson can outrun everyone, and he can hit all of his receivers. It's amazing what this kid's done since 1 year since we saw him here at Kinnick Stadium. He's an unbelievable player, and if he keeps doing this, Michigan's going to be in the hunt to win the Big Ten championship. But I'm picking Notre Dame because I think Michigan State's going to have a lot of problems with the wide receivers and tight ends at Notre Dame, and they showed that inexperience and showed those problems because there were a lot of big plays that Florida Atlantic had, and that's why I think Notre Dame's going to win.
But I think Michigan State's going to be able to run the ball really well. You take a look at Edwin Baker and Levon Bell. They both combined for 6 touchdowns and 500 yards of offense already on the ground in the first 2 games. And despite the receiving core and what the tight ends are doing, I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. He's an experienced leader. I think he leads this team. It's in Spartan Stadium, which I think maybe give him a slight edge too. But I just think right now Michigan State's a little farther ahead under D'Antonio. The program's a little better than what Notre Dame is right now under Brian Kelly. I think they got a lot of talent. I think this is going to be a close game. In the end, I like Michigan State. I think they're a sleeper in the Big Ten. I've been saying it all year. Jake's been saying it too, and I think maybe Mike possibly too. I think this is a team that could get maybe 8 wins this year. I think they're good enough to beat Notre Dame. Close game, close plays at the end determine this one, but I like Michigan State to get the win. Number 12, Arkansas travels to Georgia. Georgia coming off a tough loss last week. Arkansas unbeaten on the year. Mike, who do you got in this one?
I've got Arkansas in this game, and it's for a few reasons. Arkansas's offense is extremely efficient. Ryan Mallett's completing 73% of his passes this year. He's got a lot of great receivers in Joe Adams, Jarius Wright, and Greg Childs. A great receiving core. And then you got DJ Williams, who's going to provide matchup problems for Georgia at tight end. Georgia, their performance against South Carolina was atrocious. Washaun Ely, the running back, came back, had 75 yards on 19 carries. This would be an interesting change, though, because Georgia gave up 182 yards to Marcus Lattimore of South Carolina. Couldn't stop the run. Stacked the box, couldn't stop the run. In this game, Arkansas is going to spread Georgia out and throw the ball down the field. We'll see if Georgia can respond. But for the record, Arkansas has not beat Georgia since 1993, and Georgia has won 6 straight games. So Arkansas, there's not a lot of precedence here, but I think the offense is going to be a little too much for Georgia, and Georgia clearly showed against South Carolina that they struggle to put points on the board.
Jake.
I have Arkansas in this game as well. Ryan Mallett has been terrific this year. He's already thrown for 700 yards. Arkansas returns 16 starters from last year's team. Georgia did not look very good against South Carolina at all last week, losing 17-6. They were held to 61 yards on the ground. Arkansas's defense is suspect. They finished dead last in the SEC last year in total defense, but I think Ryan Mallett will put up enough points to outscore Georgia in this game. I'm taking Arkansas.
Let me tell you a few things about Arkansas and Georgia. Number 1, Mark Richt has never lost to Arkansas. Number 2, Arkansas has never beat Georgia in Athens. Number 3, Arkansas has lost 7 of their last 9 SEC openers, and as Mike said, Arkansas has lost 6 straight times to Georgia. Georgia, did they look bad last week? Absolutely. But are they going to win this week? Yes. They're going to beat Arkansas. Arkansas hasn't played anybody. They don't have a defense. Neither of these teams have a defense. Last year, this final score was 52-41. A lot of points going to be put up in Athens. I like Georgia.
But you have to be a little concerned about the absence of A.J. Green.
I know. A.J. Green had 2 touchdowns
I think
last year.
I think Georgia's going
to. I still think Georgia's good enough.
I think Georgia will definitely perform a little better. Precedent does change. LSU last year had not won in Athens since 1987. Went in, got a big win last year. Things can change. These are different teams. The history is important, and I think it does have some sort of maybe mental effect. But I think clearly, if you look at these teams on paper, Arkansas is the superior team.
Games aren't played on paper. Georgia is going to get the win. They're still going to win the SEC East. I don't care what anybody says. Let's talk about the Iowa game. The only game this weekend that features ranked opponent versus ranked opponent is number 9 Iowa Hawkeyes going to Tucson to take on the 24th ranked Arizona Wildcats. Arizona's looking pretty good so far, but they haven't really played a tough schedule yet. But Mike, who do you got in this one?